Today is September 24th, 2022. Let me start by saying that I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. This information is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. This is a video about AMC and APE, and it's titled The Post-Pandemic Future. So, I put together the materials for this video on Friday or so. I was kind of feeling down because AMC stock was down, APE stock was down significantly. I'm invested in both, of course, as well as everything else that I talk about. And I saw this tweet by Aron. He said he's going to be in San Francisco on Friday. And hey, come and join him and watch the movie. And the movie he's going to watch is Avatar. And if you look at Avatar, at an earlier tweet of his about Avatar, he says Avatar 2 is coming out, and he's going to watch Avatar, and AMC is going to be showing Avatar 1 before Avatar 2 comes out, so that way you'll be all set to see it. And Avatar is one of those movies that it's really nice. It's really good to see on the big screen. It's huge. It's immersive, right? He's seeing this in IMAX. IMAX is a gigantic, laser 3D screen. The music and sound is all around you. It's immersive. It's really good. The last movie that I saw on the big screen, well, not the last movie, but one of the best movies I've seen on the big screen was this movie, of course, which is Top Gun Maverick. And Top Gun Maverick made something like $1.44 billion worldwide, $1.45 billion worldwide. And that's as of September 5th, 2022. And again, that's one of those things you love to see on the big screen because it's got airplanes, you're flying through the air, you got a first-person view. It's terrific. But compared to Avatar made $2.847 billion worldwide. And in fact, Avatar still holds the box office record, right? I mean, 2.85 billion. That's a lot of money. And 1.45 billion, while nothing to sneeze at, would put Top Gun Maverick, way down on this list, below Lion King even. And but so how successful do you think Avatar 2 will be? Well, it could be very successful, right? AMC will be showing Avatar 2 in Q4, but what about Q2? Well, they're going to be showing Avatar in Q3. And so they have a nice setup there, right? Avatar 2 is going to be coming out in Q4 to be released, and they'll be showing Avatar in Q3. It's a nice setup for audiences. They get to remember Avatar on the big screen. It's pretty nice. So I was wondering, how are movies doing today? Well, we're still in a pandemic, right? I think one of the last movies I saw was Thor: Love and Thunder. So, and that made $760 million worldwide box office. It's not too bad during a pandemic. What about Minions? Minions is out. I haven't seen Minions, but The Rise of Gru, but 914 millions, worldwide. Top Gun Maverick, of course, we talked about earlier, 1.464 billion. Jurassic World Dominion, almost $1 billion worldwide, almost $1 billion. And finally, The Batman, right, that came out, again, all of these movies came out in 2022, 770 million worldwide. That's not too bad for the movie industry. Aron happened to make a tweet. He said, post-pandemic companies have grappled with how to encourage workers to return to offices. He's thinking, do you think a 4-day work week would make sense instead of 5? Might be good for AMC if you get a 3-day weekend. What do you think? So he posted a poll, and he got an 85% rating back on the poll. As you can see, I voted. I'm not sure. I don't know. But in either case, he posted a poll and said, yeah, great idea. 85% approval rating. 19,000 votes. Pretty good. 19,000 votes. So 19,000 people at least saw and responded to his tweet. Okay. Anyway, this was this was followed up by another poll that says, hey, do you think he should promote it, the 4-day work week idea? And yeah, everyone says yeah, or at least 80% say yeah, go ahead, promote it. Why am I talking about this 4-day work week tweet by Aron? Well, it's really because he's mentioning post-COVID, and as you know, the White House and Joe Biden has officially stated that Joe Biden has officially stated he thinks pandemic's over, despite criticisms, right? Despite criticisms. So, is the pandemic over? I don't really know. I mean, will it be over one day? Yeah, sure. Of course. But what happens to AMC when the pandemic is over? That's an interesting question. And that's what I started thinking about. So I said, okay, let's see if we can figure out what AMC revenues and earnings would be once the pandemic is over. And to do that, we have to look at the past to predict the future. Okay. So we're going to look at 2019 Q4 full year results, and that's pre-pandemic. So we can see how AMC was doing prior to the pandemic. And this is their financial results. And we only need to look at this part of the financial results, the GAAP revenue, right? So if we look at the GAAP revenue, and specifically if we look at 2019, the year ended 2019, and the year ended 2018, we get these two numbers. Let's put them in a grid here. So the revenue for 2018 was $5.46 billion, and the revenue for 2019 was $5.74 billion. Okay, pretty good. Okay, but that was 2018 and 2019, and as we know, there's been inflation. So let's calculate inflation. Let's see how inflation adds to that. We know that a dollar in 2019, according to the U.S. inflation calculator, is worth $1.16 today. Okay, so let's put that in for an inflation adjustment. And what about for 2018? 2018, it's worth a little bit more. A dollar back then was worth $1.18 now. So we put those into our little spreadsheet, and we calculate what the revenue would be if it's inflation adjusted, right? So that means you're looking at about $6.4 to $6.6 billion of revenue, inflation adjusted, in those last 2 years. Pre-pandemic revenue, of course, right? So that's what the pre-pandemic revenue could be. Let's make a column for 2023. Let's say the pandemic's going to be over in 2023. I don't know. I think it will. Who knows? And so let's project our revenues at $6.6 billion. Okay. Now, if we take, to calculate earnings, we need to actually figure out, what the expenses are, right? Revenue minus expenses equals earnings, basically. So let's look at the 2022 Q2 results. These are the newest results in the last quarter. And let's look at the expenses, because these expenses would be the most relevant, right? So we know that in 2022 Q2, AMC spent $1.182 billion in expenses, operating expenses. So if we project that out to 4 quarters, let's say they spend the same amount for 4 quarters. That's about $4.73 billion they would spend in operating expenses, just operating expenses, right? Given that level of expense, that means your earnings are somewhere in the range of $2 billion almost, right? $1.93 billion. There are 516.8 million shares. So divide that by 516.8 million, and you get $3.73 projected earnings per share. Right? That's if they keep the same expenses as Q2 and then multiply it out by 4. Now, if we add into that a PE ratio of 20 to 1, which is not unreasonable, that means an estimated share price of $74.67. That's not bad. That's really not too bad at all. And we know that, Wall Street looks forward in time. So that's what you're looking at. And that's the fair value without a squeeze. If there is a squeeze, the price would be a lot higher. But that's not the situation today. Today, we know we're not there yet. AMC is low on cash, to an extent. They got about $1 billion or so, but, they have a lot of debt, and they're not yet profitable. Okay, so in terms of not being profitable, that means that they're bleeding money. That means that they're losing money. But it's they got $1 billion in cash still, but they're low on cash. So what's Adam Aron working on? He's basically got to pay down debt and put cash in the bank, because once the pandemic is over, AMC is going to make a ton of money. So, so the fact of the matter is, APE shares have been sold, and they're meant to raise money. And the purpose of APE shares is to pay off debt, is to be sold to raise money to pay off debt. So APE shares have been issued. Sorry, I misspoke. APE shares have been issued to AMC shareholders. One APE share for every AMC shareholder, right? But the intent is that eventually Adam Aron plans to sell some APE shares, and he plans to sell it to raise capital. And that capital he's going to use to pay off debt and put cash in the bank and basically survive until the pandemic's over. But he doesn't necessarily need to right now, but that's the purpose. AMC has about $1 billion in the bank, but it would be good to pay off that debt. So let's see what happened to APE shares. Well, if we look at APE shares, one of the things we can look at is the naked shorts and the failures to deliver. Okay, this is the SEC website. We know that they recently released some failure to deliver information. This is some processing that I did with their FTD, and we saw that there was a ton of FTDs, right? 43 million FTDs on the very first day. Failed to deliver. That's the first day of settlement. That means that the trade took place 2 days earlier, on the 22nd, which was the first day of trading of APE shares, which was 35% of all trading volume. Now, by the third day, okay, we're talking about the fact that 24 million shares were naked shorted that day, which was about 68.7% of all trading volume. So 68.7%, more than 2 out of every 3 shares of trading was from naked shorting. Okay, that's got to have an effect on the price. And that was in some videos that I did earlier. I'll provide links to those videos. But that's a key takeaway, right? So that's a huge deal. Finally, after several days, the news media, or the mainstream media, started picking up the news. And they came out with this article on the street and said, APE and AMC stock failures to deliver keep adding up. And they have three main bullet items there. They talk about what a failure is. They said there's been 43 million FTDs. And the final bullet item, or their final takeaway, is nobody's quite sure why there have been so many FTDs associated with APE and AMC stock. Huh? Yeah. This is what the mainstream media has to say. Always listen to the mainstream media to understand what their narrative is. Okay? They'll usually tell you what not to do. Anyway, so they talk about what an FTD is appropriately. And then they talk about the APE and AMC failures to deliver. And they say they count them all up. They count up all the failures to deliver. You're not supposed to do that. It's a running count. And they say that there's 129.5 million failures to deliver during that period. That's a huge, gigantic number. Even if they didn't count them up, there's 43 million failures to deliver on the very first day, which is a huge, gigantic number. Okay, stocks like Apple have like 0. 0 fails to deliver. Okay, fails to deliver basically means that you bought something from somebody and they didn't deliver what you paid for. Right? Imagine if you bought a couch from someone and you paid them $1,000 and no couch. What's that mean? Jeez. Anyway. So then they talk about Adam Aron's tweet on APE and how APE shares will exist, and they also talk about Adam Aron's tweet actually on what is it? On how he doesn't believe that synthetic shares exist, and many of you may disagree, but the preferred equity dividend goes only to company issued shares. And so there's some questions that they bring up, saying a lot of people think, hey, a lot of these APE FTDs may be the result of people not getting their shares. It's not the case, because the FTDs that are being reported from shares that were bought, not shares that were provided as a dividend. In either case, they misleadingly talk about that. So my key takeaway from this article is that it's an article written about FTDs, okay? And the mainstream media normally doesn't write any articles about FTDs because it's not something they want to talk about. The author of the article clearly doesn't understand that FTDs are a running total. They're adding up all the FTDs. Why? I don't know. Okay, so who knows? It's spreading, misinformation or FUD. Who knows? I don't know. It would be good if they mentioned that there are normally 0 FTDs. Because a lot of people don't. A lot of people are new to FTDs. The article mentions the Aron Tweet where he describes that APE shares are providing a share count. But then the article finally concludes that there's a lot of FTDs on APE and AMC. And they're not sure why. It's unclear. That's insane. Anyway, so it's a poorly written article, but hey, at least it's an article. It mentions things that might get some exposure. So, good. But I view it as mostly spreading misinformation, to be honest. Anyway, so let's hear what this guy, Patrick Byrne, has to say. This is a tweet by AMC Bull. Thanks, AMC Bull, for actually tweeting this. And let's see what Patrick Byrne had to say about FTDs.
If I made you SEC chairman today, and you had one thing that you could do with an ultimate power to change one rule, one something, what would it be?
Failures to deliver. Failures to deliver. Strategic failure to deliver is a crime, and we hang you over the bullies, and we hang you on Park Avenue. If you sell a stock and you fail to deliver, that's a crime. And if you're doing it 60,000 times in a row, you're manipulating the market. I was in China. China sent some people to talk to me in the middle of all my fights in 07, 08, and with the permission of actually the SEC, I sat with a Chinese economist and explained. I, of course, kept within the explanation that I'd been saying publicly about what was going on. I just explained that much to them. I went back to China. I went to China 10 years later, and I explained to them what was going on in our settlement system and how weak it was, and all these problems that are now commonplace for people to understand if they're in your world. They went back to China. 10 years later, I was in China, visited, and they rolled out the red carpet for me. And they said, "What can we do for you?" And I said, "Well, I'd love to talk to whoever runs your settlement system in China." And they said, "Well, they live in Beijing, and it's a special team that oversees it, and they're not allowed to speak with foreigners because we understand that this is like even more precious than nuclear weapons is the settlement system and the capital market." The Chinese understood what I'd been screaming at the SEC and the DOJ. They understood the vast importance of this. But they made a special arrangement, and like 8 people flew down from Beijing to see me. I'm sure there were a couple spies in it or something. And I sat with these people, and I asked them, I wanted to know what of my information had they taken back. And it turns out, and so I said, after getting to know each other, I said, "Well, I'd like you to tell me what happens if there's settlement, with a settlement failure, how do you fix that or how do you address it in the Chinese markets?" And they said, "Oh, Mr. Byrne, there are no settlement failures in the Chinese market." I thought, "Oh, this is just some propaganda, we don't have any problems in China." And I said, okay, I know there's not any, but just really when it happens, and on occasion it's got to happen, how do you address it here? And the guy's like, "No, we don't have settlement failures in the Chinese market." And I asked him a third time, and I said, "Okay, really, just off the record, I know there are, but of course it happens." And he's like, "Mr. Byrne, listen to me. There are no failures in the Chinese capital market." Then he said it in a certain way that I understood. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What was he saying? They get a bullet in the back of their head. If you act like Ken Griffin of Citadel, you get a bullet in the back of your head. Because you can't go into their market and do. In other words, they took it totally seriously, all the warnings I was shouting at the SEC, and they acted on it, but our own government did not because it's corrupt.
There you go. Best. I originally actually skipped over this tweet because it was. I know the Overstock story, and I thought, okay, it's Patrick Byrne talking about it, and yes, he did a great job with Overstock, and Overstock story is well known. But I am really glad that I saw that video. So thank you, AMC Bull, for actually posting that. That was a really good tweet. Anyway, copy paste happens to state that, retail investors are the victims of predatory financial institutions who've been selling synthetics, counterfeit shares to them for decades. The government does nothing to stop it. So either MOAS happens or this will end in years of nationwide protests. So we will see. Failures to deliver are the result of naked shorting. And so let's look at shorting. Let's look at what's non-naked shorting, at least. This is what's officially stated. This is what's officially told to people. So this is self-reported information. It's officially the short numbers. If you look, they're only presented twice a month, on the 31st or at the end of the month and the 15th. So you can only see short interest, or you only know what the short interest is twice a month. I don't like to look at spreadsheets of numbers. I like to look at charts, so I turn the spreadsheet into a chart. These are the reported short interest. If you look at it, there's over 100 million shares that are short on AMC as of 8/31. Okay, that's huge. Over 100 million shares are short. That's 1 out of every 5. Here's what I'm saying. Right, you got 516 million APE shares were issued. We know that one for every AMC shareholder, they need to deliver an APE share. We know that there's over 100 million. There's over 100 million AMC shares that were short on the 31st, and that means that there's 1 out of every AMC shares were short. That means those shorts need to deliver those APE shares. So how does this all work out? I mean, some people are new to shorts, so I put together a nice little animation to show things. Okay, so here we've got 3 people: Ms. Lender, Ms. Buyer, and Mr. Short. Okay, so Ms. Lender has a share. That's the white thing that's standing next to her, right? Ms. Lender has some real shares. And you got Mr. Short. And Mr. Short, he wants to sell shares that don't exist. So he makes a deal with Ms. Lender. Ms. Lender lends the shares to Mr. Short, and Mr. Short owes the shares to Ms. Lender. And Mr. Short also pays some fees to Ms. Lender to make shorting, worth her while. So Mr. Short pays some small fees to Ms. Lender, so she gets a few dollars. But she still owns the shares. Mr. Short has borrowed the shares. He technically hasn't bought the shares. He's borrowed them. And he owes the shares to Ms. Lender. And so she is a shareholder, right? She is owed shares by Mr. Short. Mr. Short takes the shares that he got from Ms. Lender, and he sells them to Ms. Buyer. That's how it's supposed to work. So Ms. Buyer winds up with the shares from Ms. Lender, okay? Mr. Short owes the shares to Ms. Lender, and Ms. Lender was the original source of the shares. She lent the shares to Mr. Short, okay? So what happens when a company issues a cash dividend, right? Well, what happens is the company has some cash, and they deliver that cash to the shareholders, okay? Well, what about Ms. Lender? Where does she get, she's a shareholder, but she's owed shares, right? She doesn't have an actual share from the company anymore. She's owed a share from Mr. Short. So what happens is that Mr. Short actually will take some cash. He'll take his cash, and he will match whatever the company paid to shareholders, and he will pay Ms. Lender. That's how that works. So both Ms. Lender and Ms. Buyer have the shares, and they both have the dividend that comes from those shares, right? Now, what happens when a company issues a special stock dividend, right? That's not cash. That's something only the company has, right? The company issues that special stock dividend. Ms. Buyer gets her special stock dividend. So if you bought AMC shares, you will have the APE dividends, right? And that's what happens. So the company issues a special stock dividend, the buyers get it. What about Ms. Lender? Does she get the special stock dividend? Yes, in a way. Mr. Short owes the special stock dividend to Ms. Lender. Okay? She doesn't have it yet, but she's owed that. So what does that mean? That means that eventually Mr. Short has to buy the special stock dividends in the market and provide it to Ms. Lender. Okay? And any other dividends that the company issues, Mr. Short has to provide to Ms. Lender. So Mr. Short, he's generally given about 90 days And it's 90 days to fulfill his obligation to provide the dividends to Ms. Lender. This is an obligation. He has to do this. Okay. So he has about 90 days to fulfill his dividend obligation, or he will be default of his or he'll be default of his dividend obligations, you know. If you're a short and you default of your obligations, then your assets will be sold in order to close your position. Okay? And you will pay whatever dividend is needed. And so your assets will be sold, and it'll be a buy to close. Whatever assets you have, you will have to be, you know, they will be sold, and you will buy whatever shares you owe to the lender. And that's a given. Generally, you have about 90 days to do this, right? There's a 90-day rule or so. T plus 90, that's what people are talking about. So that's what's going on with AMC stock, right? And in August, on the 4th, after the market closed, the APE shares were announced. So, and, you know, they were pretty much told that, the first day of trading will be the 22nd. And the APE shares would be distributed on the 19th. The date of record was the 15th. So they have plenty of time. So shorts would have plenty of time to get out of their position, close their position if they wanted to. Right? But they didn't. Let's see what happened. So what happened was on the 5th, the first day of trading, the stock price of AMC went up a little bit. And by the 22nd, the stock price would come down to where it was at the start, prior to this APE shares being announced. So I don't think the shorts closed their position because, the price didn't go anywhere. We're talking 1 out of every 5 shares would have to be bought again, right, by the shorts, because that's how many shares of short interest there is, right? That didn't happen because the share price basically didn't move very much at that time. It went up and came back down. So the AMC shorts clearly did not close their position. That means they owe anywhere between 89.15 million to 102.88 million shares of APE. Those shares of APE should have been delivered on the 22nd, but they weren't necessarily. They have about 90 days, let's say. Anyway, the shorts didn't close their positions of AMC. They owe a huge amount of APE shares, which actually they were supposed to provide on the 22nd, but they did not. So they're due 90 days from August 22nd, right? They have 90 days, which means they have plenty of time to close their positions. Or they had plenty of time to close their positions. They didn't have to owe these APE shares, but they didn't, and they chose not to. Let's see what happens with APE shares. APE shares are down. This was, why I started making this video at first, because I was feeling kind of down, right? APE shares are down a lot significantly. But I mean, if I just think about it, right? The reason APE shares are down, there were 43 million fails to deliver. That means there were 43 million naked shorts on the very first settlement day, right? 43 million naked shorts on the very first day of APE trading. That's insane. And we know that now, as of August 31, at least, there are 49.73 million short shares of APE. Insane. Anyway, let's look at this FTD data a little bit. And I'm going to add 2 more columns. Okay, I'm going to add a column for the trade volume column, which is the volume at the time of the trade date. And I'm going to add a percentage of trade volume column. Okay. So every line, we've got a settlement date. We've got a trade date that's associated with that settlement date, which is two days earlier. We've got the trade volume, which is a volume associated with that trade date. We've got the quantity of fails, which happened, which is equal to the naked shorting on that trade date. And we've got the percentage trade volume, right, which is a percentage of naked shorting that happened on that date. Okay. The FTDs are a result of naked shorting. And if you look at them, they present 32 to 68.7% of trade volume on any given day. Any given day. And in fact, on the 24th, okay, 2 out of every shares traded was a naked short share. 2 out of every 3. Okay. So naked shorting clearly has an effect on the price of APE. Clearly. And I'm saying this is abusive naked shorting for sure, clearly. Okay. Let's add two more columns. We're going to add a net FTD settled column, and we're going to add a settlement date column. So the net FTD settled is, I'm just going to subtract one FTD from the previous FTD, right? So as of the 25th settlement date, there were 4.781 million shares less FTDs than the previous day, right? Which means that they must have settled 4.781 million FTDs. Okay. Let's look at the volume that took place, the trade volume that took place at the time of that settlement, right? The trading volume on the 24th is it's 35 million shares, 35,891,000 shares. Okay, the trade volume is just the trade volume is the volume on the trade day, which is just 2 days prior to, which is the day of the settlement date. Okay. Sorry. The volume at the settlement is just the volume on the trading day 2 days prior. Okay. I mean, 2 days after the trade took place, because that's let me say this again. The volume at the settlement is the trade volume at the settlement date, and the settlement date is 2 days after the trade date. So, on that very first day that we see some FTDs have been settled, there was 23 million shares of volume traded on that day. Okay. And if we look down just one more day, by the 26th, right, that was a settlement day, there were 14 million FTDs that were settled on the 26th. The volume at the time of that settlement, the trade volume at the date of that settlement, is 13.877 million shares. So there's clearly less trade volume than shares were settled. So what does that say? That's very strange. Okay, that says that the settlement of the APE shares was not by buying to close the short position. So the settlement was done by locates, right? And when a settlement is done by a locate, that means that results in an increase in the short interest of APE shares. And so I believe that all these APE shares, I believe that all the short interest that comes by, right, is a result of market makers naked shorting APE shares. And they can't buy them. So they become short interest. So they're just basically located, right? They're saying they could buy the shares if this person sold shares to them, because we know this person owns the shares. They've been identified to have shares. If we make them an offer, they'll probably sell, right? No, they're not going to sell. That ain't happening. Anyway, so regarding the APE shares, market makers and shorts decided to short APE shares from the very first day of trading, right? This resulted in 43 million shares that failed to deliver on the very first day of trading of APE. Okay. On 8/24, 2 out of every shares traded was a naked short share. And in general, every trading day reported 32% to 68%. Almost 2 out of every 3 shares traded were naked short shares. That's humongous. So clearly, the volume of naked shorting has an effect on the price of APE shares. Clearly, the APE shares are a victim of abusive naked short selling, right? And the failures to deliver have resulted in an open short position because the FTDs settled via locate. And we also know that there are still 89.15 million to 102.88 million APE shares that need to be delivered by shorts to lenders 90 days after August 22, or they will be liquidated, or those shorts will be in default and they'll be liquidated. Now, these guys had plenty of time to close their short position, but instead they chose instead they chose to delay and short some more. Right? They manipulated the price of APE lower using abusive naked short selling. And the apes will be forced to buy about 100 million ape shares. Okay? 90 days after August 22. So sometime around November timeframe. Okay? And this is just the known reported AMC shares. This is just the known self-reported short interest. Okay? There's a good indication that there's a lot more than 100 million naked shorts. And if there are, that's a huge run up in price. Anyway, let me end by saying I saw this tweet early this morning. Aron said it was such a privilege to watch the original Avatar on a giant 80-inch by 100-inch IMAX screen at AMC, or 80-foot by 100-foot IMAX screen at AMC Metreon 16 in San Francisco. More than 350 AMC shareholders and movie fans. What a smash hit movie. Here's someone who met with Aron. Jimmy Dape, thank you for the tweet. He said he had a chat. He had a chat about 43 million burning questions. We know what that's about. All he can say is his faith in Aron is still strong. His silence and ability, his faith, his silence and his abilities are 100% concrete. So should yours. Yeah, I agree. I feel better after making this video because I just wanted to at first analyze what was going on with ape shares and all that, and just by doing the analysis, I was like, geez, this is freaking amazing. It's just, you look at the numbers. And instead of the mass hysteria that's out there, right? The shorts are meant to try to tear you down. And if you just look at the raw numbers and see what's going on, it should be incredibly invigorating. Anyway, let me end by saying that I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. This information is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. It is September 24th, 2022. And goodbye.